Greetings, brothers and sisters, and all those who are watching for the very soon return of our Lord Jesus Christ. I have what I feel is a revelation from the Lord about the time we are living in that I'm going to share with you. So I watch a lot of Watchmen videos. Particularly, I watch Dr. Barry. I love Dr. Barry, and I love his charts. And this video that I'm making right now is going to be sort of reminiscent of his videos, in that I'm going to show you a timeline that I believe that the Lord has kind of shown me. In his timelines, he focuses on the history of Israel and the parallels to the end days with the prophecies in the Old Testament. So his focus is on the history of Israel and the modern day Israel state, and how that fulfills biblical prophecy, and how that ties into the coming of Jesus. Most of us understand the difference between Israel and the church. And I'm not going to go into that argument, but I am going to focus on the history of the church and how it relates to the second coming. So in his videos, his focus is on Israel. This video I'm doing now is going to focus on the history of the church. Now, we can think of the church as being born, so to speak, when Christ died. This is the age of grace, the age of the church, right? It was started when Christ died, and it will end with the rapture and the tribulation. And in Revelation 12:5 says that, and the woman gave birth to a child that would rule the nations with a rod of iron, and her child was snatched up to God and his throne, which we believe signifies the rapture of the church, right? So if we think about that child, because it also describes that child in Revelation as being born, right? And just as the woman is giving birth, the child is snatched up to God, okay? So what if we think of the church as exactly that? What if we think of the church as a baby that is about to be born, okay? A baby whose conception happened when Christ died on the cross. So if we take the last 2,000 years and we consider that to be a gestation period of a baby, and we look at what happens during the 40 weeks of gestation for a baby and what has happened in the church over 2,000 years, what if we were to overlay those two timelines? Well, that's what I've done, and I'm going to switch my camera and I'm going to go over this with you guys. Okay, so here's what we're looking at. We are looking at a timeline of gestation from 0 to 40 weeks. And we're looking at a similar timeline that is from 28 AD or thereabouts to 2028. And my apologies for the messiness of this chart. But as you can see, I was basically just sitting and praying and asking God for revelation, and I thought of this. So I just started looking at history and timelines and things. So some things I found really interesting. I found there's a few highlighted milestones that are just so strange that they happen at the same time. So interestingly enough, at 2 weeks is when actual fertilization happens in a baby. And the Gospels weren't written until around 70 to 100 AD. So you have the Gospels written around the same time that you have actual fertilization, which is fascinating because the Gospels are like, it's kind of like what fertilizes the entire church, right? For our whole life period in the womb here. And we're thinking of the church as being the baby, and we're thinking of the world as being the womb, okay? So don't think of like the Catholic Church and the Roman Empire and all of the kingdoms of the world. Don't think of that as the church, like the development of the church, because the church itself isn't like the Roman Empire or these different kingdoms. The church itself are the people that truly know and accept the Lord, his elect, right? So try to separate the kingdoms of the world from that. But if the baby is the church, it represents the people that know and trust and love God and love Jesus and accept him. Then the world is the womb in which the church is growing in, okay, so to speak. And Jesus, when he came down, sort of, in a way, impregnated the world with the church, with the true elect. So at 2 weeks, we have actual fertilization, and this is when the Gospels were written. Interesting. Okay, then you have cell division, and around 3 weeks, you have the zygote implantation in the lining of the uterus. Then, interesting is at 4 weeks, you have the beginning of, hopefully you guys can see this. I'm going to start zooming in a little bit here so you guys can see a little bit better. But you have the development of organs at 4 weeks. And around that same time, you have the first persecution that happened in the church around the year 250. And so right after that, you have the organs begin to develop. And that's, of course, when persecution comes, is when things really start to happen, when things really start to grow, right? Around 5 weeks, you have the heart begin to beat. Now, interesting is that around that same time, right after the second persecution, you have the Nicene Creed, which resolved many differences that Christians had in those days. So they kind of formed a heartbeat with that, with the Nicene Creed. At 6 weeks, you have facial features forming. Other religions were outlawed by the Roman Empire in 395. Kind of interesting there. At 10 weeks, you have, it is called a fetus, not embryo anymore, and the organs begin to actually function. Now, this is kind of interesting because this time period is at the end of the first trimester is when the placenta begins to take over. And by the end of the first trimester, the placenta has taken completely over from the mother, okay? So, and at the end of it, it can swim vigorously around the womb. At the end of it, the chance of miscarriage drops vastly because the placenta is feeding the baby. And right around that time, at the beginning of this placenta taking over stage, you have the Roman Empire ends. And so you can kind of think about the Roman Empire being the sort of initial nourishment to Christianity, since they had persecution, which is kind of like almost like the mother, am I going to reject this baby or not, with the because the antibodies from the mother often try to reject the baby, and that's why you have the membrane that stops the antibodies from coming over and attacking the baby until the placenta takes over. So you have the Roman Empire ending here at the beginning of this stage, and then you have at the end of it, right around then, you have the Charles Martel halts the Muslim advance into Europe, which if that had happened, if that hadn't happened, if the Muslim advance had gone into Europe, it maybe would have caused a miscarriage in a way, because Europe was the cradle of Christianity, where it began. So you have this interesting stage right here. Kidneys begin to produce urine, can make facial expressions. Around this time, their vocal cords begin to develop, and they can cry right after this period. Then we have Charlemagne crowned, and then we have the second trimester. Some interesting things here where you can have the baby, the mother can feel the baby moving around 18 weeks. And you can also see that there is a parallel with the growth of Christianity around the world. So the baby's kind of moving around the world with the Prince Vladimir converting to Christianity in Russia, which was a big deal. So baby's moving, baby can hear at 20 weeks. And then this is an interesting stage where you have the sense of motion is developed around 23 weeks. And around this stage, you have the Crusades happening. So they're going around and crusading, right? They're moving around. And, you know, I'm not going to go into the historical arguments for the Crusades for or against, good or bad, but just interesting that this sense of motion is developed around that time. Taste buds can, and this is interesting, can survive outside the womb or outside the uterus around 24 weeks, right? And then you have, right after that, you have the Black Death Plague, which reduced a third of the population in Europe. So it's interesting that it was kind of a test of survival that, you know, or a third of the population of Christendom died, but it's still going to survive, right? And then you have, at the end of the second trimester, you have the Bible being translated into English. First with the Wycliffe Bible into Middle English, and then with the Gutenberg Bible in I can't remember exactly the year here, but it was around 1517, I think. Or no, 1517 was Martin Luther, and the Gutenberg Bible was right before that. And interesting, this happens during, and this is the Renaissance period, is happening in the very first part of the third trimester, where the baby is learning to sleep and wake, open and close eyes, and begins to dream around this time, right in the middle of the Renaissance, and right above the Reformation. You can see that the baby begins to dream. How interesting. And you have the New World settlements here happening. They're dreaming of a new world. And central nervous system develops when the invention of physics. And even more fascinating is right around that time was the Great Awakening, which was the first great revival. Right around the time the central nervous system develops is the Great Awakening and the Wesleyan revival in England in 1738. So just so interesting, this parallel between the Renaissance opening and closing eyes and starting to dream. And so then you have, at 37 weeks, you have early term, which kind of parallels the beginning of the Pentecostal or Spirit-filled movement, which we consider to be God pouring out his Spirit in the last days, beginning with the Azusa revival. So it's almost right on top of it. And then, interesting, again, you have, in the last few weeks of pregnancy, you have this maturation happening of the baby, where it's becoming as mature as it's going to get in the womb. And then you have, in 2006, the World Council of Churches formed, which also leads to the justification doctrine, the doctrine of justification between the Lutheran and the Catholic churches, which actually reconciles the Lutheran and Catholic churches and brings them back together after what happened during the Reformation in this division that they had. So it's almost like they're the good part, the true parts of the church and this isn't a I know that there's problems with the Lutheran and Catholic churches, obviously, but there are many real true believers in them, and this document wasn't a heretical bad document. It was outlining how we were saved by grace, and basically that they're reconciling their differences. So it's interesting how that is in parallel with the maturation of the baby here. So, and we of course believe that her child was snatched up to God and his throne in Revelation 12:5. This is the rapture of the church, and this is the birth of the baby that is about to happen. And you want to talk about, these new age people that have this idea of Mother Earth and being one with the universe and being born into a new age. Well, it's because their souls long for the truth, and it is partly true. We as humanity, the true believers and the true followers of Christ are going to be born into a new age wherein we will have our glorified bodies. We will live together with him forever. And so it's just it's always interesting to me how to see these new age people that have this sense that the world is about to change. They sure do, don't they? And they're right. It is about to change. But they don't understand, and maybe some of them will after the rapture during the tribulation, but they don't understand that it's Christ is the truth and not we ourselves. It is God who saves us and not we ourselves, right? He is the potter, we are the clay. Anyway, I just wanted to share this because I thought it was an interesting timeline if you look at it in this way, because I believe that the church is about to be born in a sense. And I know things are going crazy in the world right now. Let me switch my camera. I know things are going crazy in the world right now. Everybody's probably watching the news minute by minute. But I just want to remind everybody what I feel like the Lord is reminding me is to just stay in that intimate place with him, no matter what's going on. Now is the time to draw near and draw close to him and not get sidetracked with what's going on. Even though, yes, we're definitely watching the news, and we're watching, and everything's falling into place, and everybody who's expecting the rapture can see that and knows that. But don't be moved, because he has a perfect plan and he has a perfect timing to snatch us away and to take the child up to heaven as it's being born. And part of my heart is to see the reconciliation of the church and the maturation of that baby, the reconciliation of the divided factions, the people that are spirit-filled and the people that aren't, and the people that are OSAS or not, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord and who loves Jesus. We are going to be united, whether we are ready for it or not. We are going to be united as one body, as one baby, when we are born and caught up to heaven. And I sort of live from that place. I live from that place where everyone who knows Jesus truly is my brother or sister. Even if they are off a little bit in their doctrine, they know, if they truly know the Lord, then we are all part of the same body. And he said that we would be known by our love for one another. So let's love one another. Let's announce the coming of our Lord. He is coming soon. He's coming so soon. If you're like me, you've watched different channels, and I say channels, I don't mean YouTube, I mean just from different sources and different places. If you pay attention to what the body of Christ as a whole is saying, you can kind of get this picture of what's happening from, it's kind of a murky picture, but like, what's his name? Bob Barber on End Time Dream and Visions has been putting out these dreams and visions that all these people have had, and you know, they're all over YouTube. And if you read enough of them or look at enough of them, you have this sense that they're all kind of like, they all kind of have the same theme. You know, they all kind of have the same fuzzy, vague picture that's starting to come into focus now. And I believe this is a season of prayer for us, that we should be praying like never before. We should be praying for the lost, the ones in our life, the ones in our lives that don't know the Lord, but that we've been praying for. We should be praying more for them and asking God for opportunities to witness to them and to bring them in before it's too late, before the harvest. Anyway, that's my 2 cents, and hope you liked the video about the timelines. I love hearing from you guys in the comments. It's really encouraging. I just feel like it brings us all together. Love all the comments in my last few videos and responding to them. So please do not hesitate to reach out, or if you need prayer, I love to pray for anyone who comments. And let me know if you have any more insight about the historical parallels between the gestation period of the church and the last 2,000 years of history. Pretty interesting. So I hope you guys are just hanging in there and loving the Lord, and just rest and trust in Him, and don't be moved. He's coming soon. Love you guys. Bye.